You've been thinking about starting a business for how long now? 6 months, 2 years, maybe longer? And here's the uncomfortable part. You've done research, you've read articles, you've watched videos, you've made spreadsheets, you've told people you're working on something, but you still haven't started. And if I asked you why, you'd probably say you don't have enough money yet, or you're still figuring out the details, or the timing isn't quite right. Those sound reasonable until you realize they're the same answers you gave yourself 6 months ago. I've spent an embarrassing amount of time studying why some people start businesses and most people don't, not because of some motivational curiosity, but because the pattern is so weird it demands explanation. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand the exact behavioral mechanism that stops most businesses before they ever begin. And it's not what you think. It's not discipline. It's not ideas. It's not even money. It's something way more fundamental that almost nobody talks about. If you're someone who's been circling the idea of entrepreneurship but can't figure out why you keep freezing, subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up, because what I'm about to explain will reframe everything. Here's what most people believe. They think starting a business is an economic decision. You calculate the costs, you weigh the potential revenue, you assess the market, you crunch the numbers, and then you decide. Rational, logical, clean. Except that's not what happens. What actually happens is you do all that analysis and then you still don't start. And that gap, that weird space between knowing you should do something and actually doing it, that's where the real story lives. Because entrepreneurship is not an economic decision. It's a behavioral sorting process, and most people get filtered out before they ever launch anything. Let me tell you about a researcher named Thomas Astabro. He published a paper in 2014 that looked at entrepreneurship through the lens of behavioral economics. Not business strategy, not market conditions, behavioral economics. And what he found was that the reason people differ in whether they start businesses has almost nothing to do with the quality of their ideas or their access to resources. It has everything to do with how they interpret uncertainty. Two people can look at the exact same opportunity, same market, same resources, same information. One person sees potential, the other sees threats. One person acts, the other freezes. And this difference isn't talent. It's not intelligence, it's perception. It's fear, it's interpretation. And here's the part that should terrify you. Most people think if they just had a better idea or more money or more time, they'd start. But the research shows that wanting to start a business means almost nothing. Intention is not predictive, action is. And the gap between those two things is where most businesses die. Think about it this way. You and your coworker both notice the same inefficiency in your industry. You both have the same access to customers. You both have similar skills. You both spend evenings thinking about how you could build something better. But 6 months later, one of you has a side business generating a few $1,000s a month, and the other one is still thinking about it. What's the difference? It's not that one person is smarter. It's not that one person works harder. It's that one person interpreted that opportunity as something worth trying, and the other person interpreted it as something too risky to touch. And that interpretation happened automatically beneath conscious awareness based on years of conditioning about what feels safe and what feels dangerous. Let's start with something that sounds obvious but isn't. Opportunities don't announce themselves. They have to be interpreted, and interpretation is subjective. What looks like an opening to one person looks like a trap to another. What feels like upside to one person feels like exposure to another. And this isn't random, it's patterned. People who've experienced failure in the past become hypersensitive to threats. They see danger everywhere. People in stable employment reframe uncertainty as something to avoid at all costs because their entire life is built around predictability. People with no exposure to entrepreneurship can't even tolerate ambiguity. It feels intolerable. So here's the insight. Entrepreneurs don't see more opportunities than other people. They just fear, ambiguity less. That's it. That's the whole game. It's not vision, it's not courage, it's tolerance. And most people don't have it. Not because they're weak, but because their life has trained them to avoid exactly the kind of situations entrepreneurship requires. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but risk is real. Starting a business is risky, and you're right. But here's the twist. Risk is not calculated, it's felt. And the way people feel risk is completely irrational. People over-index for loss, embarrassment, and social failure. Loss aversion is one of the most well-documented cognitive biases in psychology. The pain of losing $100 feels roughly twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining $100. I first learned about this in the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. I highly recommend the book. And that asymmetry destroys entrepreneurship before it starts. Because when you think about starting a business, the downside feels infinite. You could lose money, you could waste time, you could look stupid, you could fail. The upside is abstract. It's hypothetical. It's someday. And your brain doesn't weigh abstract upside against concrete downside. It just feels the downside and panics. Now think about someone who's never started a business before. They don't have positive reference points. They've never experienced what it feels like to fail at something entrepreneurial and survive. They've never had the experience of launching something small, learning from it, and iterating, so their brain has no data to counter the fear. The fear is all they have, and fear without experience becomes paralysis. This is why first-time entrepreneurs freeze. This is why people with stable jobs struggle to leave. This is why smart, capable people can spend years thinking about starting and never do it. It's not weakness, it's rational threat assessment based on incomplete data. Their brain is doing exactly what it should do. It's protecting them from perceived danger. The problem is the danger is overestimated, and without action, there's no way to correct that overestimation. Let's talk about something most people don't realize. Your identity is tied to your current role. If you're an accountant, part of your self-concept is I'm an accountant. If you work in tech, part of your identity is I work in tech. And that identity provides stability. It tells you who you are. It tells other people who you are. It gives you a framework for understanding yourself. And starting a business threatens that framework. Because if you leave your job to start a business, you're no longer the thing you were. You're something undefined. You're in transition. And most people cannot tolerate identity ambiguity. Think about it. If someone asks what you do and you say, I'm trying to start a business, that feels unstable. It feels like you're not there yet. It feels like you're failing in slow motion. But if you say, I'm a consultant, or I'm an engineer, or I'm a project manager, that feels solid. That feels real, and the cost of giving up that solidity is higher than most people realize. This is why people with established careers struggle to start businesses. It's not that they can't. It's that the psychological cost of leaving a defined identity for an undefined one feels unbearable. And nobody talks about this because it sounds weak, but it's not weak, it's human. Let me tell you what happens when you combine loss aversion, identity threat, and social comparison. You get paralysis, complete paralysis, because now you're not just risking money or time, you're risking your sense of self, you're risking how other people see you, you're risking your social standing, and those risks feel catastrophic. Even if the actual downside is manageable, the felt downside is overwhelming, and your brain doesn't operate on actual risk. It operates on felt risk. So here's what happens. You think about starting. You feel the fear. You rationalize the fear by telling yourself you need more preparation. You do more research. You make more plans. You tell yourself you're being responsible. But what you're actually doing is avoiding the discomfort of action. And because the discomfort never goes away, you never start. You just keep preparing forever. There's a concept in behavioral economics called hyperbolic discounting. It means people overvalue immediate costs and undervalue future benefits. The pain you feel today weighs more than the reward you might get in a year. And this destroys entrepreneurship because starting a business is all about trading short-term discomfort for long-term potential. You work harder now. You earn less now. You risk embarrassment now. And maybe in 2 years, it pays off. But your brain doesn't like that trade. Your brain wants rewards now. It wants certainty now. It wants safety now. And entrepreneurship offers none of those things. So your brain rejects it, not consciously, but automatically, beneath awareness. And you experience that rejection as hesitation, procrastination, or just not feeling ready. Let me make this concrete. Imagine you're sitting at your desk right now. You have a stable job, a paycheck, benefits, a title, and you're thinking about starting a side business. What does starting that business require? Time, energy, focus, uncertainty, the possibility of failure, and what does it offer? Nothing guaranteed, just potential, just hope, just maybe. Your brain looks at that equation and says, why would I trade certainty for uncertainty? Why would I trade comfort for discomfort? Why would I risk what I have for what I might get? And those questions feel rational. They feel smart. But they're not calculations. They're rationalizations. Your brain is finding reasons to justify its fear. And because those reasons sound logical, you believe them. Here's the part that gets dark. Most people who want to start businesses never do. They spend years thinking about it, planning it, talking about it, but they never launch. And eventually, they stop trying. And when they look back, they tell themselves it was the right decision. They say things like, I wasn't ready, or the timing wasn't right, or it wouldn't have worked anyway. And those stories let them preserve their self-image. They let them avoid the discomfort of admitting they were afraid. But the truth is, they were afraid, and the fear won. And that's not a moral failing. That's just what happens when behavioral barriers are stronger than conscious intention. Most people don't fail at entrepreneurship. They're filtered out before they ever try. And the filtering mechanism is fear dressed up as rationality. Now, let me tell you about something called construal level theory. It's a psychological framework that explains how people think about the future versus the present. When you think about something far in the future, you think about it abstractly. You focus on the why, the big picture, the vision. But when you think about something in the present, you think about it concretely. You focus on the how, the details, the obstacles, and this shift destroys action. Here's how it plays out. When you imagine starting a business someday, it feels inspiring. You think about freedom, autonomy, impact. You think about what success would look like, and that vision feels motivating. But when you sit down to actually start, the vision collapses into details. You have to figure out pricing, you have to write copy, you have to deal with uncertainty. And suddenly, the thing that felt inspiring feels overwhelming. And this happens every single time. You get excited about the idea, you start to act, you hit friction, the friction feels unbearable, you stop. You tell yourself you'll come back to it later, and the cycle repeats. And each time you stop, it gets harder to start again, because now you're not just dealing with the original fear. You're dealing with the shame of having stopped before. You're dealing with the story you've told yourself about why you can't do this. And that story becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Let's talk about regret. Most people think regret motivates action. They think if you're afraid of regretting not starting, you'll start. But it doesn't work that way. Because there are two types of regret: regret of action and regret of inaction. And people feel those two types very differently. Regret of action is sharp. It's immediate, it's vivid. You tried something, it didn't work, you feel stupid, you feel exposed. And that pain is intense. Regret of inaction is dull. It's chronic, it's vague. You didn't try. You wonder what if. But the pain is diffuse, it's background noise, it's easier to live with. The pain of regret is more intense than the pleasure of success. So you optimize for avoiding regret, which means you optimize for not trying. And that optimization feels rational in the moment. It feels like you're being smart. But over time, it's the thing that keeps you from ever starting. Let me tell you something weird. Entrepreneurs are more optimistic than non-entrepreneurs. That's well documented. They overestimate their chances of success. They underestimate how hard things will be. They're overconfident, and you'd think that means optimism causes entrepreneurship. But it doesn't work that way because non-entrepreneurs are more accurate, they see risks more clearly, they estimate costs more realistically, they're better calibrated. But accuracy doesn't equal action. In fact, accuracy often prevents action because when you see all the risks clearly, it's harder to justify starting. Overconfidence reduces fear, it makes ambiguity tolerable, it makes risk feel manageable. Accuracy increases hesitation. It makes every obstacle feel bigger. And this is the paradox. The people who are wrong about how hard it is are the ones who start. The people who are right about how hard it is are the ones who don't. And I'm not saying you should be delusional. I'm saying that perfect information is often the enemy of action because perfect information reveals every reason not to start. And most people stop there. Here's why most advice about entrepreneurship fails. Most advice assumes rational actors. It assumes stable emotions. It assumes that if you just explain the benefits clearly enough, people will act. So people say things like, just start, take the leap. The worst thing that can happen isn't that bad. And if you're someone who's frozen with fear, that advice doesn't help. It makes things worse because now you feel like the problem is you. Now you feel like other people can just start and you can't. Now you feel shame on top of fear. And shame is paralyzing. Advice that ignores behavioral reality doesn't empower people. It alienates them because the real barrier isn't knowledge. It's not information. It's not even motivation. The real barrier is that starting a business triggers every threat detection system in your brain. And telling someone to ignore that system doesn't work. You have to work with the system, you have to design around it. And most advice doesn't do that. So let me tell you what entrepreneurship actually is. It's a behavioral filter. The system filters people by their tolerance for uncertainty and their ability to act without reassurance. Starting a business is statistically abnormal. Most people don't do it. And that's not a moral judgment, it's just a fact. The system is designed in a way that most people are filtered out before they ever generate revenue. Not because they're incapable, but because the behavioral requirements are extreme. You have to tolerate ambiguity. You have to act without certainty. You have to risk your identity. You have to accept that you might fail publicly. You have to do all of this without external validation, and most people can't do that. Not because they're weak, but because their entire life has trained them to seek stability, avoid uncertainty, and externalize risk. Think about how we're educated. From kindergarten through college, the system rewards compliance. You get good grades by following instructions. You advance by doing what you're told. You succeed by meeting other people's expectations. And then you enter the workforce and the pattern continues. You get promoted by delivering what your boss wants. You keep your job by not making waves. You build a career by being reliable and predictable. Everything in your life up to this point has trained you to seek clarity, follow established paths, and avoid unnecessary risk. And then entrepreneurship comes along and asks you to do the opposite. It asks you to create your own path, to act without permission, to embrace uncertainty, to risk failure. And your brain looks at that request and says, absolutely not, because everything you've learned tells you that's dangerous. Astebro's core contribution is this. People don't fail to start businesses. They're filtered out by behavior before they ever try. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You start to realize that the question isn't why do so few people start businesses? The question is why would anyone expect most people to start businesses given how we've trained them to think about risk? Now, here's something practical that actually works. Starting small things is critical, not because of motivation, not because of momentum, but because small actions reduce threat perception. When you take a tiny step, you're not risking your identity. You're not exposing yourself to catastrophic loss. You're just testing. And testing reframes fear as feedback. Let me give you an example. Instead of quitting your job to start a business, you sell one thing to one person. You don't announce it, you don't tell anyone, you just do it. And what happens? You learn something. So maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but either way, you're not destroyed. Your identity is intact, and now you have data, not hypothetical data, real data. And real data changes how you feel about risk, because you've proven to yourself that action is survivable. This is not hustle advice or grind culture. This is behavioral alignment. You're working with your brain, not against it. You're reducing perceived stakes, so action becomes tolerable. And over time, small actions compound into momentum. But the momentum is behavioral, not motivational. You're not getting more excited, you're getting less afraid. Let me reframe the core question, because I think most people are asking the wrong thing. The wrong question is, how do I start a business? That question assumes the problem is logistical, that if you just had the right steps, you'd do it, but that's not the problem. The right question is, why does starting feel threatening? Because once you answer that question, you can design around it, you can figure out what specifically is triggering your threat detection system. Is it fear of losing money? Design a version that costs nothing. Is it fear of public failure? Start in private. Is it fear of wasting time? Set a time limit. The point is, entrepreneurship begins in perception, not execution. If you can shift how you perceive the act of starting, the act itself becomes easier. And most people never do this work. They just keep trying to force themselves to start and wondering why it's not working. It's not working because you're fighting your own brain, and your brain is older and smarter and more powerful than your conscious mind. So stop fighting it and start working with it. Not because they can't develop it, but because their entire life has optimized them for something else. Stability, predictability, safety, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to start a business, you have to understand that you're asking yourself to do something your brain is actively designed to resist. So let me land the plane here. Listen up. If you've been thinking about starting a business for months or years and you haven't done it, you're not lazy, you're not incapable, you're not missing some special gene. You're responding normally to a situation your brain perceives as threatening. And the reason you're stuck is not because you need more information or more money or more time. You're stuck because starting feels dangerous and your brain is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's protecting you. The problem is it's protecting you from something that isn't actually as dangerous as it feels. And until you address that perception, no amount of planning or motivation or advice will change anything. You'll keep circling, you'll keep researching, you'll keep intending, and you'll keep not starting. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The system doesn't care if you start or not. The system is fine with you staying exactly where you are. The only person who loses is you. Not because you're missing out on wealth or success or status, but because you're spending years of your life feeling stuck on something you never actually tried. And that's the real cost. Not the money, not the time. The cost is living with the question of, what if I had just started? Now you can stop fighting yourself and start working with the way your brain is actually wired. If this video helped you see entrepreneurship differently, subscribe, because most of what you've been told about starting businesses is designed to make you feel bad about not starting. And I'm here helping people like you rewire your brain. If you like this video, check out my next one where I deep dive into more behavioral finance topics to help get you to your next level.